Hello, everybody. Jake Drake, Teacher's Pet, Chapter 7, Bad Dream, Good Idea. Wednesday night, I had a dream. I was in a cage, a little wire cage in a room. I was on my hands and knees. There were 2 bowls inside my cage. One of them was filled with Cheerios, and the other one had root beer. Every once in a while, I would bend down and eat a mouthful of cereal, and then lick up some root beer. All around me, there were little cages with other kids in them. Mark was in one, and Ben Grumson, and there was Marcia and Carl, even Willie. All of us were munching cereal and lapping up soda. Then this tall lady came into the room. She bent down and looked in every cage. She looked in Marcia's cage, and when she did, she frowned and said, "No." Then she looked in at Ben, and she frowned and said, "No." She looked into every cage, and she kept saying, "No, no, no." Then she bent down and looked into my cage, and she smiled and said, "Yes." And she opened my cage and put an orange dog collar around my neck, and she held out a fig Newton and said, "Good boy." And when I sat up, she put the fig Newton in my mouth. I started to chew the fig Newton. Then the tall lady bent down and patted me on the head, and she said, "Now you're my little pet." And when I looked into the lady's face, it was Mrs. Carp. I sat up in my bed and grabbed at my neck, and I started yelling, "No, no, take this collar off me, I'm not your pet, no, no." And that's when Dad came into my room and turned on the light. "Easy, Jake, it's all right." Dad sat on my bed, and he held onto my arm. "It's all right, Jake, you were just having a bad dream, that's all. You're Jake, and I'm your dad, and we're right here in our own house. And you're awake now, and everything's all right." I was shaking, and I was sweaty, and Dad kept holding onto my arm. I was so glad he was there. When I was totally awake, Dad said, "Bad dream, huh?" I nodded, "Yeah, a nightmare," and I shivered. Then I said, "Dad, were you ever a teacher's pet?" He said, let me think. "Yes, I think I was once, back when I was in 6th grade." My eyes opened wide. "Really? Did you want to be?" Dad smiled. "Did I want to be?" "Yeah, I suppose I did. My English teacher was a lady named Mrs. Palmer, and she was very smart. And I guess I thought she was pretty, too. My friend Tim and I stayed after class sometimes to help erase the chalkboards and straighten up her room, little things like that. So I guess we were both teachers' pets." I frowned. "And did she treat you and your friends special, or let you get away with stuff?" Dad thought a second and then nodded. "Yes, I think she did, at least a little bit. But I remember one time when I didn't do my homework and Mrs. Palmer caught me. She frowned at me and scolded me in class and said I had to come in after school. But when I went after school, she just smiled and said, 'Now, you won't do that again, will you, Jimmy?' And I said, 'No.' And then she let me leave, and I always did my homework after that, too." "But what about the other kids?" I asked. "Didn't they hate you for being the teacher's pet?" Dad scratched his head, which made his hair look even more messed up. He said, "I don't really remember. All I remember is how Mrs. Palmer used to smile at me sometimes." I said, "But what if you had a lot of teachers, and they were all being super nice to you, and you didn't even like the way they smiled, and then all the kids thought you were trying to be all goody-goody? What about that?" "Well," and then Dad gave this really big yawn. "If I was trying to get the teachers to treat me special, then I guess the kids would be right, because that would be like I was trying to get away with something. But if a teacher decides to be nicer to you than she is to some other kid, then that's not your fault. That's the teacher's fault, because a teacher's not supposed to be nicer to one kid than she is to another, right?" I nodded, and Dad said, "Now listen, you lean back on your pillow and shut your eyes and go back to sleep, all right?" And he pulled my covers up under my chin and kissed me on the cheek, and then got up and shut off the light. "Good night, Jake." "Good night, Dad. Sleep tight." Then I was alone again, and I kept thinking, because Dad was right. A teacher's not supposed to be nicer to one kid than she is to another, or a principal either. And I wasn't trying to be a teacher's pet. I was just trying to be myself. So it wasn't my fault. And even when I had tried to be bad, that hadn't worked either. Because I'm not bad, and everyone knows it. And then I got a big idea. It was big, and it was simple. But it would work. Maybe it was too simple. There was only one way to find out, and only one place, too. And that was school. On Thursday. So first I had to go back to sleep, and that's what I did. And I didn't have any more dreams about orange dog collars.